Welcome to the Movie Heaven, Movie Hell podcast extra. And I'm joined by Clive Ashenden, who's prepared to talk about his filmmaking career. So, Clive, what was the thing that got you interested in filmmaking?
Let me cast my mind back several years. Um, it's interesting because growing up, uh, as I did in the UK, it was almost when I grew up, and I loved going to the cinema. But it was always, we would go and see sort of Disney films or Steven Spielberg films or the blockbusters of the day, and it always seemed like filmmaking was something that happened in America. That the British filmmaking scene. I mean, people obviously that there were British films being made, but they just weren't on my radar. They weren't the films that I would go and watch. They weren't the films that my parents would take me to watch. So it always seemed like movies were great, but they were a different world. So that wasn't something that ever kind of really entered my consciousness as something that I might do. But I always loved watching movies. But it wasn't really until much later that I sort of came to filmmaking. I mean, I'd always sort of written short stories and was really into art, drawing, painting, and so it wasn't until I went to art college that I found filmmaking because the art college I went to, Portsmouth College of Art, Design and Further Education, which is now been sort of subsumed into part of Portsmouth University, I believe, um, was basically someone uh, had bought some VHS cameras because they felt like video was something they should be doing, but no one was really using them. That there was a kind of video film course that was attached to the building, but they weren't. It wasn't a big program, and basically, even though they had a sort of tech department, they weren't really being used, to be quite honest. And so it was one of those things where I just sort of I got into I became passionate about films about the same time that I started to get into filmmaking, and through things like Movie Drome, um, the Alex Cox introduced BBC kind of cult film program. My sort of movie horizon started to open up past the sort of Steven Spielberg produced, George Lucas oeuvre, and sort of like suddenly there's all this wonderful world of films, and I just became absolutely voracious and was making up for lost time. And uh, this is, I guess, about the time that my sort of love of horror movies started, because growing up, that was something that was absolutely forbidden. So suddenly, all this forbidden fruit became available. So I just became obsessed with movies and was just watching them all the time, and became joining film societies, watching films a lot. So then, when I found out that there was there was cameras that were available as part of this course, I just it just was like, oh, I'll give that a go. And I think it wasn't the first time I picked up a camera. It was like something at school, and we never got to see what we shot, so nothing ever came of it. Whereas this, it was like, okay, I actually had an assignment that I had to do. And I remember the first film I ever shot was a thing called A Postcard of Portsmouth, which is my hometown, and I had to make a visual, like, non-narrative piece based, which gave people an introduction to Portsmouth. So I went and basically shot a load of different parts of Portsmouth and cut it together with the music, Portsmouth Point by William Walton. And sort of, that was my first thing I ever edited, first thing I ever shot, and I was kind of hooked after that. I wouldn't ever want to show that film to anyone ever again, if you understand what I mean. But
I do,
but
yes.
but it was like, wow, I put those two shots together, and and one, and it cuts on the beat, and it's all really exciting, and it was this real sort of discovery of things. And then after that, I was, even in the sort of group projects we were doing with other people on the course, I was sort of shooting some performance art pieces that we did in there. um, and I shot my first sort of narrative film, I think, which was kind of like the final thing I did at art college, which was a film called Fugitive 1999, which was set in the then futuristic year of 1999. Um, yes, and which is a science fiction piece about, hey, a fugitive. Who'd have thunk it? Who was in this sort of post-apocalyptic wasteland, and he was on the run from these sort of, let's call them Terminator characters, but it was basically the sort of secret police or something like that. And he had this sort of microfilm. There was this whole MacGuffin element to it, and the whole thing was shot POV.
Oh, okay.
So it was kind of an experiment there. So, and I also shot it on VHS, on VHS tape, full size VHS,
Right.
um, and I shot it with available light.
Okay.
So as you might, available light and candle light.
Oh, okay.
So which was a lot less successful than it would be with, say, DSLRs now, shall we say?
Trust me, I've done the candlelight thing myself with a DV camera, and that wasn't very successful either. I think, yeah,
It was it was the actors, in inverted commas, in the film were my fellow students, all of whom were amateurs. And it was the first thing I'd ever done in the narrative form. But it had a beginning, a middle, and an end. And we shot it guerrilla style in the Hilsey Lines forts, which kind of a row of old, I think, World War II sort of bunkers and stuff, which sort of line the hills around Portsmouth. So, and which are normally filled with sort of tramps and homeless people. There weren't any in there, but there was lots of detritus to show that they'd been there, which obviously made
yeah,
everything look more, post-apocalyptic, if that's a word.
yes,
Um,
authentic.
yes, that's a better way of putting it. Yeah, so I did that, and I guess that was my entry into it. And after that, I knew that that's what I wanted to do, and I was going to become a filmmaker. I sort of realized this kind of too late to get up any kind of real good portfolio of work, but at least I had something. So yeah,
Hmm.
so then I went on and was like, yes, I'm going to, be the next Sam Raimi, the next Orson Welles, the next, yeah, there's a whole list of my heroes. I'm going to be all these people. I'm going to shock the world.
So, what would you call your first proper short film?
Oh, so how much of my student work do I count in this?
Well, what was the first thing you made after finishing college?
Okay, I think my first proper film, inverted commas, was actually was probably my kind of graduation piece from college. I did a film and media HND at Farnborough College at Farnborough College, because they had like a proper TV department and they had the best kit, and well, they accepted me. So there we go. The piece that made me think, you know what, I can do this. I can actually have an effect on people. Sort of emotionally connect with people. I made a horror film called Dirt, and it's it's about it was about a serial killer that was obsessed with cleanliness.
Oh, right.
And it was a properly seedy, nasty piece, I have to say,
Okay.
because his whole bit was cleanliness was next to godliness,
Ah,
and his victims were unclean and therefore had to be killed. So he wasn't a very nice man.
no. So I gather, so things like not washing your hands and stuff like that was a trigger for the guy.
Well, I think just like women were a trigger for the guy. He was he was a
Okay.
total misogynist. He was had lots of problems, but he was absolutely
Okay.
obsessive about bathing himself, about washing his hands,
Oh, okay.
uh,
Yeah.
and all these sort of ticks. Um, but it sort of surprised me the reaction I got because I edited this short and I lucked out. I got a couple of sort of amateur stroke semi pro actors who'd done a bit of theatre stuff, and I think I'm right in saying particularly the guy who played the psychopath, whose name was Bill Wallage, who he did a fantastic job, and was very good about the fact that I was just sort of learning, and the fact that we were using knives that weren't properly stage blunted. So
Oh, right.
there's a lot of moments I look back on in my early student films where health and safety concerns, that there were some issues there. Thankfully, I learned from that, and nobody got hurt. I hasten to add. So, but yeah, you should always use properly blunted knives when you're asking one actor to put them next to the other actor's throat.
Yes.
Now, you cheat the angle, so they're not actually. It's not like next to the skin or anything. But
Yeah,
obviously,
yeah, yeah.
one slip and then it could have gone all badly wrong. But and there's other stories I could tell about taking replica firearms out in public, which probably not good to do. Um,
No,
no,
no. It's never been a good thing to do in the UK. Um, I think it's even a worse thing to do now. Yeah, you really have to let the police know that you're running around with guns.
yeah, and it's not. The thing is, in my defence, it wasn't something that I'd planned to do. It was because there's a certain often guys involved in the production. If you don't have a really strict armorer who's there locking everything up,
Yeah.
they're like, oh man, guns, and they just turn into big kids, so they start messing around with them, and
Yeah.
and you have to sort of and if you're driving the car, you can't really sort of take guns out of people's hands. Anyway,
Yes.
that's a different film. But so I made this film, and the brief was to make a horror or a thriller, and I made a proper horror film. It was like the effects work was a bit rough because I was basically doing it myself, and building things out of papier mâché, and making my own fake blood, and this was pre-internet or early internet days, so it's very difficult to find recipes
Yeah.
for kind of how you make your own blood. So I was just improvising with what I had to hand in my student cupboard. So at certain point, actors had like horrible concoctions in their mouth made up with things like ketchup and ground down coffee and Tabasco sauce, and it's just sort of like
Oh,
really nasty
yeah.
stuff. Yeah, it's the sort of thing you don't want in your eyes, you don't want it in your mouth, you don't want it, anywhere near you, really.
Yeah.
But it looked kind of bloody on camera, so you do what you can.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, yeah. I think um I know myself that I've put a few actors through, some quite painful stuff. But the thing is, though, it's amazing how some actors are real troopers that they won't even complain about this what you're doing or this sort of foul thing they've got to put in their mouth or anything.
Yes, that actors are brilliant, basically, and I've been very lucky with the people I've collaborated with. So, and they've been very kindly not told me to just f off. A lot of the time when I've
Yeah.
asked them to do difficult things. So yeah, but yeah, so I make this film Dirt, and then I show it to my class, and I got a real reaction. People were really shocked, the teacher was horrified, which obviously I was really delighted by. It's just totally, people were really grossed out. They were, and it was the first time, I think I got a jump out of people.
Oh, nice.
I got like kind of got into the story, but afterwards there was like, oh, I just got kind of laid into. It sort of reminded me of it was all the things I was reading in magazines, right, about my horror film heroes, about how they were condemned as being misogynistic because they had all these, and obviously,
Yeah.
I was as well, because I'd made this film. He's not a sympathetic character at all. The killer. He's, we're following the heroine, but at the time I was very much in the kind of like horror film, real horror ends badly
Ah, right.
mode.
Yes.
So
So,
it ended with this sort of really darkly ironic thing where the killer dies, but the heroine ends up is left like sort of locked in the boot of his car. And it just ends with her sort of banging on there and calling for help, and then it cuts to black.
mm.
Yeah. So, but the sort of reactions that sort of really encouraged me, and 'cause obviously, yeah, there must be something sick about me, clearly, but unfortunately, the sound recording on that film is such that it's not really something that I could put on online now. It's just, I had one. I had a thing where I showed it at, I think it was Exploding Cinema, which is a
Okay.
kind of film club in London where I first moved to London. It was one of these clubs where it was very cliquey, and they clearly had their favourite filmmakers who showed their films there every
Right.
month or every other month.
Yeah.
And so I got the worst slot. I got this sort of, I think I was the last film on. By that
Ah.
time, half the audience had left because to get tubes and things, and the other half were totally pissed. Um, and at which point they put my film on, and everything else has been kind of like happy and sort of like all like really these nice little comedies. I'm not saying they were bad movies. Some of them were good. Some of them were experimental. Um, and then they put my sort of really grimy, gritty serial killer movie, which because it was shot on VHS, it actually sort of made it look like it gave it a really kind of seedy, kind of like this is like a killer's home movie feel to it,
Oh,
which
right.
really added
Yeah.
to it. And I made it before I saw Texas Chainsaw, but having obviously watched Texas Chainsaw and loving it later, it was like I could see why people were going, oh, you must really love Toby Hooper kind of thing,
Mm.
because it had that sort of like, you felt a bit grimy after watching it feel. But the problem was that the sound wasn't good,
Ah.
and their sound system made the constant background hum really, really bad throughout.
Oh. Yeah.
It was a difficult experience because, there was a load of pissed people booing me basically, booing
God.
the film. But and at the end, I'm thinking I'm going to get bottled. I'm not going to make it out of here because there was some real hostile reactions here, and I wasn't
Yeah.
sure whether they were. It was difficult to tell whether it was just the fact that it had this oppressive like buzz throughout, which is if you imagine a kind of like Eraserhead's stroke, Elephant Man soundtrack sort of cranked up to 11, like underneath everything, sort of, it did add to the unease of the film. In my defense,
Yeah.
but but it was there because that's what I had to shoot on, and I had no control over it.
Yeah, it's the on-camera noise. I
Yeah.
mean, I've seen many shots like that, and I've heard it myself from stuff I've shot,
Mm.
which I then decide, oh, silent film.
Yes, yes, very good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I had this horrible experience, but at the end, just I was sort of, you know, sort of trying to slink out. This
Yeah.
I got cornered by this goth girl who basically said, "Oh, I thought that was absolutely brilliant," and just sort of raved about the film to me, and that was really nice because I was just feeling really beaten down and like everyone hates me and hates my film, and she came out and she was like no, don't listen to them. I thought it was great. I really loved the ending, and it was nice, especially after the film having been sort of condemned as being this misogynistic piece. I was a very young, still pretty shy with the opposite sex kind of guy, and then this girl comes up to me and starts sort of fanishly saying, "Oh yeah, loved it. If it was a really great horror film, carry on. You got to make more." So yeah, so that was the sort of happy ending to that.
Brilliant. No, no, no. That's no, that's good. I mean, are you been tempted to remake it?
I have and I haven't. It's kind of, I feel like, having watched a lot more horror films since I wrote that, there's a lot of ground that's been done with a lot of other serial killer movies. Um, and also, it's a very raw film. It's a film where I basically filmed like the first draft.
Oh,
If you
okay.
see what I mean, just because there was such a pressure
Yeah.
of time, and what got cut got the only things that got cut in the edit. It's funny because some of the power comes from the fact I didn't censor myself. If you see what I mean, it's just
Okay.
properly nasty because I just had an idea and just did it, and it's like, maybe I should have thought about that a bit because it's just really horrible. But hey, I don't know. Occasionally I thought about that, but usually, you don't like to go back to things.
No, this is true. I mean, I asked that question because people always come up to me and say, you know, have you ever thought about remaking Firepower, my first film? And you know, similar to you, it was I shot it on Super 8, so it was really grainy and it gave it that sort of surveillance video sort of look to it. Uh, but that was sort of part of its charm, is that it was like that. And that's the fact is, yes, bringing it back and redoing it in a different format with different actors and stuff, it's still going to be the same story. It probably wouldn't be as impactful. I mean, it's I just don't like sort of revisiting the past in some ways. I'd like to move forward.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, at times I've considered taking some of my shorts and expanding them uh, to feature length. I thought about that more with say Snatching Time than I have with Dirt, but uh, because I think that you've got that had more sort of characters. I mean, that was something which, the way I shot that, the sort of the death, so kind of saw like death games, we only got glimpses of, and they were played very much for laughs. But you could open it up and have the whole kind of, basically almost play the game show out in real time, have more contestants, so you have more people to kill. I mean, it's one of those things that sort of almost writes itself, so it's tempting to do. But um yeah, I don't know. You always tend to feel like you want to sort of to do something fresh and new that feels, right for you.
Yeah. Well, no, that you're mentioning Snatching Time, because the first time I heard about yourself was from Stephen, who you were in a production company called
Sick puppy films.
yes, with Rob Wickens. So tell me how that came together, how the three of you sort of came together for this. I think it was to make Snatching Time, wasn't it?
Yeah, we made Snatching Time for as part of the 48-hour film challenge, which was, I mean, there's a number of these things going around now, but this at the time it was like the only one, at least the only one in the UK, and it was run by a guy called Johnny Oddball. And it sort of gradually had sort of expanded and become sort of better known, and they had like good industry judges, and it was one of those things where if you could get to the final round where the industry people could see you, that it could possibly be something which would help you. And obviously, winning competitions, uh you know that's always good for profile and so on. We all liked the idea of the challenge of it, and we were all, me and Rob were working in post production, so we had access to certain kit that we felt it was doable. And I'd met sort of Stephen, and he was a composer, and was really sort of obsessed with film and loved horror film. So it just all seemed like a good match, and it was just sort of about, it's one of these things where you need to get like your kind of cast and crew in place ahead of time, because the idea of 48-hour challenge is that you had to write, shoot, and edit the film in uh, in 48 hours, and it
Yeah.
had, the whole thing had to be, finished and delivered within that 48-hour deadline. So, not a lot of sleep.
No, I've never done it myself because I'm not a big fan of forcing a process like that, within such a short amount of time. Because I remember editing this girl's film I think it might have been for another 48-hour film challenge. I don't think it was for the Johnny Oddball one. But I remember there was this horrendous editing mistake in there where there was a shot of a kettle that went on for a minute, but because she literally wanted the tape and was running out the door because she had to get down to
Yeah,
Brixton and I'm living up in Kingsbury, and oh man, and it's just like if we had the time.
I know. I've had some horrific. I've done the 48-hour film challenge twice, and
Mm,
both times I had horrific experiences associated with it. But with Snatching Time, it was one of those things where eventually the end products worked out really well.
mm,
And I think the only way to do it really is to not go in with a fixed idea of something you want to do. You have to be completely fluid, and you have to not end up so it's all on one person's back. The more you can spread the load, the better. So it's initially we had a brainstorm where everyone, like cast, crew, uh, like sort of threw in ideas, and then me and Rob went off into a room and basically wrote it, and then we shot it. And we knew we had certain location locks, which is like the basement of this pub. Obviously, we had our cast already there, so certain characters suggested themselves, if you see what I mean. So we were lucky enough to get a somewhat of a name, at least
you did,
at
yeah.
least in TV. Well, especially to people of my age group. We had Hugo Myatt, who played Tragar the Dungeon Master on the TV show Nightmare, and who is just a brilliant character actor who's done loads and loads of theatre, both as a director and an actor, and he'd done lots of sort of character parts. He's gone on to do lots of bits and pieces in TV and film. He was in Bernard Rose's Snuff movie, another horror piece, and but he's done lots of stuff.
I know. I mean, he was unrecognizable in your film because I've never seen him without a beard
Yes,
before.
that's the
So,
thing. He didn't have that, but I mean, he was
yeah.
such a trooper about it, and it was one of those things where I knew his partner Jackie through my work. I'd met her. She's post production supervisor, and
Oh,
I
okay.
found out that he was a partner, and I was like, oh, do you think he'd be interested in doing this short? We won't have any money, but we'll feed him and make sure he's travel sorted out. So, and he very kindly agreed to do it. So yeah, we had those things in place, and then yeah, and we got it done. But the cut we handed into the competition wasn't anywhere near like director's cut. It was like, okay, this meets the criteria. It tells the story, but uh, and it had to be 3 minutes or under. And the director's cut of, let's just say the director's cut, which I subsequently went back and did, is a bit longer than that. I think it's 5 minutes.
What was left out of the initial cut then?
Well, it, it just had no real time to breathe, which sort of really killed a lot of the comedy moments, and all this. There was a lot of less of the sort of build up to the Anthea moment, which is the sort of big punchline, I guess, of the piece. And also, I had this really bad experience again with the exhibition of the film, where I'm not sure whether it was just because no one had slept when we played the film out to tape, and there was played the film out. There was some sort of problem, but when they exhibited it, everyone else's film was at the correct size, even though they were showing it at the BFI IMAX for some weird reason, and ours was like the sort of size of a postage stamp in the middle of the screen. It
Oh
was it
God,
was like
yeah.
a horror. It was I was just like, oh, this is like a nightmare. I mean, you know, the sound was there. You could just about squint and see what was going on. You know,
Oh, I'm sorry to laugh, but yeah,
uh,
I heard about that screening and I was just like, my heart went out to you because it's, oh, you know, because
you kill yourself doing it. You got your cast and
yeah,
crew there, or at least most of the cast and crew, and everyone's really excited. And then it's our turn, and then it's like, what the fuck happened there? You know, and and you sort of think, well, no, did no one behind the scenes notice that they were encoding it this way? What the hell were they thinking? Because I don't, I it's it can't have all been our fault. I just yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, I've heard lots of things about that the 48-hour film challenge. I won't say them here, but I just yeah, it sounds quite possibly that was a fuck up on their end. Just like yeah,
I'd say it's worth doing once, especially it's a good way to learn and to sort of like because often you can sort of really kind of obsess over the details of your film and like oh, I want everything to just be right and and if you're forced to do it like okay you have to come up with something and shoot it and it's a good exercise, let's put it that way.
yeah, yeah.
And
I just wish it wasn't 48 hours. I mean, a week. Give us a week. You know, give us a week challenge.
I don't know. That's part of the. You know, at least initially, with these sort of challenges, you felt like it even the playing field, so that because you would get people from like ad agencies and professional places entering, and I always thought that was like, well, why are you doing that? You know, it's you know you sort of that. What's the point of that?
Yeah, because the end of the day, they always tend to win the prizes for these things because you know they have everything to
Yeah,
hand.
everything looks a bit slicker and so on. But if they're rushed, if they don't have time to properly develop the story, doesn't matter how good it looks, then they're gonna not gonna win. So there was a certain amount of sort of you know it evened things up, and obviously to stop people cheating and filming stuff ahead of time, then you know you picked certain things out of the hat. You picked your subgenre of horror in our case it was, and you picked. You picked the title of the film, and I think it was an object you had to include. So
Yes, yeah, it's common fare for these things. It's usually, you know, I think in the sci-fi one they did a few years ago, you had to have like a liquid bottle or something like that. You had to have a prop in there just to sort of. But I mean, still, apart from like the genre, which is definitely you couldn't have that prepared in the. But if you're doing like the sci-fi one, you know, you can get a shot of whatever the prop is in later. You could already have shot it.
yeah,
I mean, I don't know. I don't know. It always feels that it's a really uneven playing field. You know, it really does, especially with the bigger
yeah.
companies.
Well, I was young. I was younger and optimistic, shall we say, and you know, and just wanting to make films. And you know, I thought we had a really good team of people, which we did. And ultimately, you know, I still think Snatching Time works as a nice little horror, comic horror short. And uh, certainly in its director's cut form, and not sort of in a little tiny thing. I mean, I did it. I did one more 48-hour film challenge, and which resulted in by far the worst film I've ever made in my life. So, uh, yeah.
Yeah.
So after that, I decided not to do any more. I made a film called Twice Weekly, which is this supernatural thriller, and that was one of those cases where I took too much on my own back, and some of the people that you know I would like to have worked with, I couldn't. I you know I'd returning actors I worked with before, and you know it should have been a better thing, but it's me trying to shoehorn what I'd been given in terms of the 48-hour film challenge stuff into a film I already sort of had in my head,
Oh
and
right.
it just didn't work, you know. And the fact that I had this really great location that I was obsessed with using, basically, I didn't have anyone there you know, whereas I was co-writing with Rob on Stashing Time on twice weekly, it was just me doing the writing, and I felt a real pressure to finish, and there was no one going, what you thinking? That's a terrible fucking idea." Which there should have been. There should have been someone. And even when I sort of, none of the cast, bless them, sort of said, "That's rubbish, Clive. Why we, why would I say those words?" On the positive side, there's some nicely shot bits. There was not badly acted bits in it, but the script is horrible, and there wasn't enough time to properly sound design and mix it, which really hurt it. I saw that one got properly projected, but it was just such a terrible movie. And Rob
Yeah,
was sort of next to me, sort of, being supportive. And afterwards, I'm like, oh, that was, and it was like, thanks for being there, buddy. I'm so sorry. It was such a crappy film, because it's depressing when you put a lot of work into something and you don't sleep, and then at the end of it, it's rubbish. But
yeah,
sometimes but you learn from these things.
yeah. Well, look, I mean, I have one question that I've been dying to ask you about Snatching Time for quite a while, and why was it that you ended up playing Anthea? Was that planned, or was that the fact that you had to step in?
um, and got to bear in mind that that we only had a certain amount of cast and crew,
Yeah,
and we were writing it, and then and there was no sort of payoff, and it needed something. And then I had this idea that, because we'd have this sort of like running joke about, he has this character Anthea, who's this glamorous assistant to this psycho who's running this game show. I had this idea that well, what if Anthea shows up, and then and I jokingly, as a throwaway, I said, "Oh, he should be like a sort of like a Leatherface character. It should just be this hulking bloke in just like in a mask or whatever." And I was the only hulking bloke like in the cast and crew who wasn't already doing, that fitted
yes,
the thing. So it was like I sort of wrote myself into a corner where, it was like, well, if you want this in the film, then you're gonna have to do it. So yeah, there we go. And Anthea was born.
yes, and absolute talking point of the film as well. But let's tell the listeners where it played.
It played at Fright Fest 2006, in front of the film Broken, and he had a Mason Broken as opposed to one of the other horror films called Broken. And yeah, it was. I mean, it was an early morning screening, but so there weren't. It wasn't a full cinema, but there were a lot of people there, and people laughed and jumped in the right places, and I got a really nice reaction from it. Someone I'd met at the festival there, actually said, uh, a mutual friend of ours, Christine, sort of said,
Yeah,
I need to get your autograph now, before you're famous." So, which is very sweet of her. So no, it was a great experience to sort of show my film at Fright Fest, and yeah, it sort of made it all worthwhile after that initial sort of screening experience. So there was that payoff of seeing it at Fright Fest, and yeah, so now I've just got to make the feature and show that at Fright Fest.
when did we meet? Because I met you at Stephen's wedding in Portugal.
Yes.
And do you mind me telling this story? Because it was kind of a misunderstanding. We thought you were going to be somebody else.
No, you could tell the story. I mean, I think maybe we should wrap this up soon.
Okay,
This chapter of my filmmaking life,
okay.
so people aren't
But I
too
just
bored.
say but we met at a wedding in Portugal, and I was there with other people, people that I'd known from the film industry as well, and sitting and there we had our names down, and there was an empty seat next to me, and it said Olive. And I was like, oh, okay, Stephen's trying to set me up with a girl. And then Clive turned up.
I mean, I think I had long hair at the time, but clearly not a girl. So yeah.
No, no. But but yeah, that's how we met. And I know you sort of I try to sort of. You did ask me a couple of times to sort of help out on films. I think this was at the point when you were doing the Straight Eight films.
Yeah, I think so. Because I was helping Rob with his films, and vice versa, and that we were working on each other's stuff, and obviously I'd seen some of your shorts, and we were all friendly through Stephen and so on, and yeah, but then it was sort of later that we'd go on, and you'd shoot and DOP a number of my films.
Yes, yeah, which was always great fun. You act as well, so how did you decide to sort of start doing the acting?
Well, as you know, Simon, often uh, in the low budget world, you end up doing cameos and things because people drop out at the last minute and so on. And as the director, you're the one not holding a bit of kit, so therefore you're one of the people who can step in. So there was a bit of that, perhaps there was I'd done some acting as a teenager, was, went to drama classes, and, was sort of enjoying it for a while, until suddenly the sort of drama group that I was involved with became all about musicals, and that wasn't really me. And I was very self conscious, and not not very happy with my voice, as a singer, given that my voice was breaking, and it just sort I just anyway I moved away from it, and got interested in other things. But I found that I got to a certain. It was actually on the Making a Snatching time when I decided that I need to get to sort of. I got into acting, and it was because when I was directing Snatching Time, I found I sort of hit a wall in terms of being able to communicate what I wanted to the actors, and it was and Hugo, our lead actor, bless him, whereas a less experienced actor would have just sort of nodded maybe at my rubbish direction, and sort of said, yeah, and then tried to figure out what the hell I was talking about. He took me to one side at one point and said, "I'm sorry, Clive, I don't understand what that means. Um, that doesn't mean anything to me, this thing that you've just said." So I sort of I tried rephrasing it, but I realized I just didn't have quite the same language because I didn't come from that background. I was thinking very visually. I'd storyboarded, I'd shot listed. I knew I wanted his character to do this thing. And I was very kind of result orientated in my direction in that early stage. Um, not perhaps not always leaving room for the actors to bring their own thing to it. And this is a very experienced actor; he knows what he's doing. And luckily, we muddled our way through, and I think Hugo gives a very good performance at Snatching Time. But I don't know how much of that is down to me. But it made me sort of stop and think afterwards. If I wanted to do this, then I needed to sort of understand more about the craft of acting. So that was the point where I started taking acting classes at City Lit. I did a number of courses. I started sort of volunteering to for little bit parts in friends' short films, um, and just and to my surprise, even though I was terrified of it to begin with, I found I really enjoyed it, and and I also found that it gave me a real understanding as a writer of writing for actors, of what an actor is looking for in a scene, because obviously as a director you're often looking in a very macro sense as the whole piece, whereas the actor is, even if they're a supporting character, a cameo, the film is about them, even if they're only in it for sort of like, half a scene. Often they've thought about a whole backstory for their character, what their day's been like before they got to this scene, which might not be which probably isn't in the film at all. Even if their character doesn't even have a name in the script, even if they're like policeman one, you can bet that the actor has sort of said, "Well, this is the name of my character." That they've given themselves a name, that their character, almost got thrown out of Hendon because they had a bad experience with drugs. They know they know that this character is estranged from their parents. That they're having a bad relationship at the moment. Whatever it is, that they've picked out certain things, and maybe they've only got two lines of dialogue. But if that helps them to play that, then great. So it was more. It's just getting into that mindset, being aware that there were different types of sort of ways, different sort of training. In terms of sort of the Meisner method, the more traditional stage acting, the more naturalistic approach to sort of screen acting. That there were these different that it's really helped me, I think, moving on in terms of working with actors and collaborating and just enjoying the process of rehearsal as well. So yeah.
Well, yeah, because talking about your latest short, Acceptance, I know that because I've shot it, but
Yeah, yeah,
insider
you were
information
there,
here.
man.
I was there, man. But I know that you rehearsed a lot with the two actresses in it, Victoria Johnson and Maria Thomas, and that actually you made a lot of changes to the script because of those rehearsals.
Yeah, it was one of those things where I got the script to a certain stage, and I knew it wasn't finished, but I wanted their input, and some of that is just needing to hear the words spoken out loud, and some of it is the fact that I'd written these two characters who are both actresses, and obviously I'd cast actresses to play actresses, so they would have that certain insider point of view, and they did tell me like no actress would say this word,
Oh, right.
or would put it that way, so and
Okay.
but that's what I wanted. I wasn't precious about it. It was going to be a collaboration. It was going to be okay, like this is the script, this is what we're talking about, and we had read throughs, which then became more of a kind of workshopping it, where I would go away, sort of like and rewrite stuff, cut stuff down, send them new pages, and then we would do the thing again. And it was also about them building up a rapport together because they'd known each other for a while. But I don't think they hadn't worked together much. So, and I wanted the feeling that they were very comfortable with each other, that because their characters were in a long-term relationship. So the idea was that this process was actually going to help when we came to the shooting, and also because we had such a limited time shooting, I couldn't lose half the day, um, having discussions about, okay, what's my motivation here? Why I'm not sure I would say this. I wanted those discussions beforehand,
Yeah.
and I allowed plenty of space, and we played it lots of different ways. That sometimes they were reading the other characters' lines, so they could hear and just and saying, "Okay, this time I want you to play it as though you're drunk." Just or imagine you've had some good news before you walked in the door. Just different ways to sort of approach the scene and sort of rethink it, and a lot of those sort of playing, because hey, there's a reason why they call these people players. A lot of that, a lot of it doesn't get used, but sometimes, you uncover something and you're like, oh, that moment was really nice actually. That moment that you just threw in there as just sort of like a throwaway bit. That's a nice bit, So you get to discover stuff like that. So, and maybe and I knew, and under the pressure of the time we were under, because we only had locations for a certain time, that was the only way we could really do it. In the same way that we shot multicam on one of the days, because I knew we had so many pages to cover, and we just would not have done it if we were shooting single cam, which I would have preferred. But yeah.
But no, it's come out really well. How is it going with Acceptance? I know you're sending it out to festivals and stuff. So how is it going on that side of things?
Well, it's gone out to a sort of like a first round of festivals. I mean, it's quite an expensive process to send it out to festivals, so I'm having to sort of stagger how we're sending stuff out. And yeah, I've had a sort of some contacts with festivals. So, but there's nothing I can announce at the moment, if you see what I mean.
Okay. Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
But no, I just think it's looking positive, and I think it's certainly a film that has an audience, and yeah, I don't read too much into a cast and crew screening, but it was nice that it got a very emotional reaction from people that we showed it to, a lot of whom weren't, associated with the film. So I feel like that it will work with an audience. So yeah.
No, it's good. I mean, it's look, I don't know about yourself, but I like it when the cast and crew like the finished film.
Yeah, that's always a plus, isn't it? Yeah.
It is, yeah, because they've gone out their way to help you do this, and it's nice to know that that's been rewarded. You
Yeah,
know,
especially if you've had a very challenging post production, and we did, but that's a story for another day.
yeah, yeah. So, so to sort of wrap things up, are you currently working on anything?
I'm writing a few bits and pieces, so yeah. And I will say, if you do like the sound of acceptance, we do have a Facebook page. So just search on acceptance on Facebook and give us a like, and you'll hopefully find out about festival screenings that are coming up soon.
Brilliant. I'll put that in the show notes with the podcast.
Great, thank you.
That's all right. Well, thank you for talking to me and sort of sharing some of your career.
Thank you for taking me back into the dark days of shooting on VHS, and and the 48-hour film challenge. Happy days. No, it's all good stuff. But yeah, I've enjoyed chatting with you, Simon. Thank you.
That's all right. And how can listeners find your work?
Okay, they can find my films by going on to vimeo.com and searching for Clive Ashenden, and they'll find my page. And at the moment, they can find Snatching Time on YouTube by doing a search for that. And if they're interested in listening to me, it's my podcast I do with Rob Wickings, the A to Z of SFF, science fiction and fantasy podcast. Then you'll find that at the A to Z of SFF.com.
And as always, you can find my work at independentrunnings.com. You can also check out our Facebook page at just search Movie Heaven, Movie Hell. We're on Twitter at Movie Heaven Hell. And yes, we're also on YouTube. Just search for Independent Runnings. So just leaves me to thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening.